And what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. I'm your host, Alex Daniels. We got a bunch of stuff to cover today. The Cookout Clash, some predictions for the NASCAR season, some news stories, and a good history segment at the end. So stick all the way through to the end of that. Let's start off with the Cookout Clash, 2026 Cookout at Bowman Gray Stadium. It lived up to its reputation as one of the wildest exhibition races in recent memory, with weather, chaos, and drama from start to finish. Originally scheduled for Sunday night, the race was postponed multiple times due to historic winter weather in the Winston-Salem, the whole East Coast, really. Everybody knows, everybody saw it on the news, but including snow and sleet that blanketed the quarter-mile oval. Crews worked around the clock to clear the track, and when the NASCAR finally got the green flag on Wednesday, February 4th, temperatures hovered near freezing, the coldest conditions many in the paddock could remember for Cup cars. Obviously, there's been some crazy ones in the past, but definitely in most recent memory. Kyle Larson started on pole for the 200-lap, 50-mile non-points event and led a race-high 67 laps, but it was anything but smooth from there. The first half of the race stayed dry, and Ty Gibbs was the leader at the halfway break before Mother Nature returned in such a big way. A wintry mix of sleet and rain hit the track just past the midpoint, forcing NASCAR to make a rare move. Teams went back out on wet weather tires on a slippery Bowman Gray surface. Say that 5 times fast. What followed was pure pandemonium. Cars were slipping, sliding, and bumping through a mix of conditions as drivers hunted for grip and tried to stay on the lead lap. And that's only a quarter-mile track, so that's hard to do in itself as it is, especially if you're running a little bit off. But in total, the Cookout Clash featured a clash record of 17 caution flags, more stoppages than green flag laps, as crews battled both the track and the circumstances just to keep the race going. When it finally came down to the closing laps, Ryan Preece pulled off one of the most emotional victories of his career. The RFK racing driver, who started 18th and fought his way forward all night, led the final 45 circuits after muscling past Shane Van Gisbergen, followed a restart on lap 156. From there, Preece opened up a gap and took the checkered flag 1.7 seconds ahead of the runner-up, which was William Byron, who honestly was my pick for this race after watching the start. Kyle Larson with the pole looked really strong, coming off the gate, but William Byron, he stayed consistent the whole race, and I thought he was going to sneak something in at the end, and he definitely tried, but this marked Preece's first victory in NASCAR Cup Series, a milestone moment after years of grinding through the sports ranks. In victory lane, he fought back tears and summed up the magnitude of the moment as a freaking long road. Preece also etched his name into Clash history by joining Jeff Gordon and Denny Hamlin as just the third driver to win the Clash before ever winning a points-paying Cup race. So, fun little piece of information or stat there on that one. Behind Preece and Byron, Ryan Blaney rallied for a strong third-place finish, continuing his trend of tough showings in the event despite adversity and weather interruptions. Daniel Suarez and Denny Hamlin rounded out the top 5, with Hamlin leading the top Toyotas. I'm going to pause here for a second on this recap. Daniel Suarez came in hot on this race, and he definitely was putting the bumper, doing a lot of grinding to his old teammates. I think you're going to see quite the battle between Spire and Trackhouse with Suarez now over there at Spire Motorsports. So other notable storylines include struggles up front as conditions shifted. Kyle Larson faded after losing track position in the wet portion of the race, finishing well back. And the unique fuel strategy that saw NASCAR bring teams in late to make sure they could reach the end without running dry. In the end of it, the 2026 Clash was remembered as much for the weather chaos as it was for on-track action. This race really tested the drivers and crews alike and gave the fans a wild start to the season. With that in the books, all eyes are now going to turn to Daytona International Speedway in the 68th edition of the Daytona 500, which is coming up this Sunday. So definitely tune into that. We'll be sure to recap Daytona on next week's episode, so look out for that one as well. All right, now time for some fun with this. We already locked in our championship picks earlier this offseason, so we're not changing those. But now that we've actually seen cars on track at the Clash, chaos, the weather, the tempers, again going back to the Suarez drama with Trackhouse and all that, let's talk about how the rest of the 2026 season feels, team by team. And let's start at the top. Hendrick Motorsports. Hendrick looks like Hendrick. That's the story. Even at Bowman Gray, where nothing makes sense, you could see speed across the board. The strengths here with Hendrick are the depth of the teams. 4 teams, 4 drivers who can win anywhere. Their mile-and-a-half program is still elite, and they usually clean up once the season settles in. So the weakness, if there is one, is expectation. Anything less than multiple wins per car feels like underachieving, and sometimes, especially early, they overthink things. Still, Hendrick is going to be in the middle of the championship conversation all year long. We already know that. The top contender, best motors in the pack, some would say, everything to go along with it, right? So let's jump over to Joe Gibbs Racing. JGR is fast, but it feels a little edgy this year. They've got raw speed, especially on short tracks and road courses. The class showed they're not afraid to race aggressively, which can be a weapon in this format. The downside is that the aggression can turn into mistakes, strategy miscues, pit road penalties, and occasional driver overdriving, still showing up the worst times. When they're clean, they're terrifying. When they're not, it snowballs from there. They're absolutely a title threat, but the margin for error feels very thin over there. We know they're all dealing with stuff on their personal side. Hamlin's in a weird spot this year, although he is dedicated to the cause. Yeah, we'll just see how it all shakes out for them, but they're definitely still going to be a threat. So obviously moving on from there, let's talk about Team Penske. Penske might be the most interesting team heading into 2026. The Clash didn't scream dominance, but it did show composure. They didn't panic, no overreact to conditions, and quietly stayed competitive. And that's kind of their brand, right? Their strength is execution when it matters most. Playoff, late race restarts, pressure moments. Penske usually nails it. The weakness, week-to-week consistency. They sometimes feel invisible until suddenly they're in victory lane. This is a team that could look very average in March and terrifying in October. So keep that in mind. Next to the team that we might talk about the most this year, that's 23XI Racing. The Clash showed they're no longer just a project team. They belong. There's speed there. There's confidence. There's real race-winning potential. In addition of the part-time drivers like Corey Heim, that only adds to the depth of the program. The strength is momentum. Everything feels like it's moving forward for them. The weakness is still experience in closing out championship. Winning races is one thing. Managing an entire playoff run is another. And I guess playoff run's not even the right term now. The chase, if you will. This feels like a breakout year, though, but maybe not a title yet, but I bet they're very close. Obviously, we've seen what they can do with that 23 and that 45 car. It'll be interesting to see how this goes for them. Now, RFK Racing. RFK might be one of the quiet winners of the Clash weekend. They showed grit, adaptability, and patience in miserable conditions. That usually translates well into the long season. Their short track and intermediate programs look pretty solid this year. The strength is teamwork. The cars work well together, and the strategy benefits both drivers. The weakness is still outright speed compared to the absolute top teams we've already discussed. They can win, but it usually takes a race coming to them, not them chasing the race. Accept playoff runs and at least a couple wins from these guys. Expect some playoff runs, maybe a couple wins, but they're really going to be one of those gray area teams this year. And if they can find that speed, then they're definitely going to compete. But again, with the likes of, the JGRs, the Hendricks, the Trackhouse even, which we're going to talk about here in a second. I mean, other guys are showing a lot of speed, and that's where these guys need to really try to perform better, engineer better, find that missing 10th, whatever it takes, right? So Trackhouse. Trackhouse definitely feels dangerous again. The Clash showed they're not afraid to try things and take risks. Their road course program is still among the best in the garage, and they're improving on ovals. We know they're going to win road courses. Their strength is their versatility in different tracks, different styles, still getting results. Their weakness is the volatility of the program. Some weeks they look like contenders. Other weeks they're buried mid-pack. If they smooth that out, they're going to be a real problem for the rest of the field. Let's take a look at Haas real quick. This is a prove-it kind of year for them. They didn't really answer any questions at the Clash. They did show an effort and some improvement. Their speed flashes, but not sustained dominance. Their strength is they do have some good resources and some experience. They know how to win if they can find consistency, but there's not a lot of confidence. That's one of their weaknesses, right? You can tell when things go wrong. It lingers a long time. It kills their momentum. This feels like they may be a mid-pack bubble-type team, like top 16, maybe not. Maybe sometimes they'll be in it for the top 16 based on the top 10 results. They're capable, but they're definitely not safe playoff contenders. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? This moves us over to Legacy. Legacy Motor Club feels like it's turning a corner. They showed progress in the Clash. Even the results didn't jump off the page. The cars do look better. The approach feels smarter, and the Toyota Alliance is paying dividends for them. The strength is long-term growth. The weakness is still execution and depth in the teams. this isn't a championship team yet, but it's trending the right direction, right? If I was going to say a mid-pack team that's going to improve huge, I would say Legacy this year will be that team. All right, final one, Spire Motorsports. Spire is sneaky. The Clash highlighted improved speed and racecraft. They're no longer just trying to survive. They're actually racing. Their strength is steady improvement. The weakness is still consistency across the tracks. Don't be shocked if Spire steals a win this year under the right circumstances. But that being said as well, you've got Suarez, who's kind of on his last-ditch effort to try and keep a career in the Cup Series. So he's going to be more aggressive than ever. He's going to try to prove himself more than ever. It's going to be insane seeing what he can pull off, and I think we're all excited to see it. I know after the Clash and listening to the radio of his in-car and everything else, I'm excited to see this passion out of Suarez. We know he can do it. He might be some real competition on the road courses. I mean, we'll just see. But the big takeaway from the Clash is nothing feels very settled. Moving forward after that, top teams are still the top teams, but the gaps definitely feel smaller. We'll see what happens with new track layouts, weather. I mean, the season could get weird really fast, right? And that's a good thing. Our championship picks still stand, but we might be sweating them by mid-season. Hard to say. I still think Willie B's going to get it this year. Mark my words on that. Yeah, we'll just keep tracking it and see where we end up. All right, let's jump into some news. Let's kick it off this week with one of the big ones out of Team Penske camp and IndyCar. Tim Cindric is officially back at Team Penske. Less than a year after stepping away, Cindric has returned to the organization in a leadership role. Penske announced the move earlier this week, confirming that Cindric will once again be involved in the team's IndyCar and endurance racing programs. Just for a refresher for everyone, Tim Cindric isn't just another executive. He's been out and one of the most influential figures in modern Penske history. Over the years, he played a major role in championships, Indy 500 wins, and the overall structure that made Penske the gold standard across multiple series. When he left the team last season, it felt like a sudden split. There wasn't much public detail about it. We all know where it stemmed from, right? It stemmed from the disqualifications at Indy. Some thought it was going to be a little difference philosophically in the team. Others assumed it was part of a broader internal reset. Whatever the reason, it seems like it was final at that time, but clearly it wasn't. Now Penske says their reunion is about experience, stability, and positioning the team for long-term success. And for a pure racing standpoint, it's hard to argue with that resume, right? Anybody who was looking to poach Cindric probably got about 10 seconds to do so, and then Penske came calling, right? So that brings us to a bigger question, and this is going to be more for an opinion on my side. Is this actually a good look for the team to fire someone and then bring them back less than a year later? There are two ways to look at this, right, on the opinion side. On one hand, racing is a results-driven business. If you remove someone and realize pretty quickly that the void they left is bigger than expected, fixing that mistake can be the smartest move. Pride doesn't win races, experience does. If Penske looks around and decided that Tim Cindric was still the best person for the job, bringing him back could be viewed as accountability, not a weakness. On the other hand, it does raise questions about leadership and decision-making. Firing a high-level executive isn't a small move. Reversing that decision so quickly does suggest either the original call was rushed or the team underestimated how much one person really mattered to that organization. It can also send a confusing message internally. If you're an employee, you might wonder how firm decisions really are or whether the rules are truly ever final. I mean, there's also the human element, right? Bringing someone back after a public split isn't always seamless. Authority, trust, dynamics, they don't automatically reset just because the contract does. That being said, Team Penske isn't known for operating on impulse. Roger Penske has built an empire on long-term thinking and loyalty to people who deliver. This move feels less like a panic button and more like a calculated correction. In the end, history will decide if this is the right call. If Penske keeps winning, and the timeline won't matter anymore, right? They post a few wins up this year. No one's going to care about this story in a couple months. If they don't, this move will be remembered as a strange footnote in an otherwise disciplined organization. Either way, Cindric is back, and in motorsports, that's a development you can't ignore. He will be sitting on Scott McLaughlin's team, and he's in a different role now, so I got to say that. But he'll be sitting there, strategy calling, doing whatever. We'll see if that leads to more later down the road, but for the time being, that's where we're at with that. All right, another big one. News out of the world of open wheel racing. IndyCar is coming to Washington, D.C. The series has announced a brand new event for the Freedom 250 year, 50th anniversary of the country. the Grand Prix of Washington, D.C., scheduled to take place on the weekend of August 23rd. This will be the first IndyCar race ever run on the streets of the nation's capital, and with the course planned around the National Mall and iconic Washington landmarks like Pennsylvania Avenue and other historic stretches of downtown. This announcement came through as an executive order signed by President Donald Trump on January 30th. The order directs the White House Task Force on celebrating America's 250th birthday to work with the Departments of Transportation and the Department of the Interior to finalize a race route that both meets safety needs and showcases the majesty of our capital city, as he so proudly put it. As part of the nation's celebrations, President Trump spoke enthusiastically about the event, saying it will showcase the majesty of our great cities as drivers navigate track around our iconic monuments and celebration of America's 250th birthday. From the racing side, Roger Penske, who's the owner of IndyCar, as we know, emphasized the significance of the opportunity, saying, quote, "There's no better way for us to bring automotive speed into the D.C. area," and suggested that the event will be a historic spectacle for both fans of the sport. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy also weighed in on the memorable line of the race potential. To think 190 miles an hour down Pennsylvania Avenue is going to be wild. What sets us apart is not just the location, but the accessibility piece. IndyCar's announcement notes that general admission viewing areas along the street circuit will be free to the public, allowing fans to experience the race without purchasing a ticket, which is a rarity for a major motorsports street event. As of now, official ticket releases and pricing and premium grandstands or reserve seating have not been published. IndyCar and race organizations have said they plan to release those details, including ticket tiers, pricing, and when sales will begin in the coming months, as track design and permit processes are finalized. Some early industry estimates suggest that paid grandstand or reserved seating marquee races can range from a few $100s for this weekend pass up to the higher tiers depending on amenities. It's all a crapshoot right now, but nothing has been officially confirmed for the Freedom 250 yet as far as that goes. But we're definitely going to try to go to this one. I mean, it's going to be a one-off, right? Like, I'm going to try to make this race. But, yeah, we got to keep our eye on those ticket prices. So, this race has already generated buzz, but not just for its location or patriotic theme, but for the logistical challenge of turning streets around the White House and National Mall into a high-speed open-wheel circuit. That being said, organizers and local leaders, including the mayor, Bowser, I believe is the mayor there, have expressed support, saying the event could be significant, boost the city's economy, and unforgettable showcase for tourists and racing fans alike. So stay tuned for more on that. We'll bring updates as the course layout is revealed and ticket information becomes available. Like I said, I'm trying to go to this one. I'm not trying to just stand on the sidewalk for free, though. I want to get in there. I want to see it. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll keep posted on that. Let's jump over to a little NASCAR news. NASCAR this week will look like a major change for ownership, and AM Racing has taken a dramatic turn. So, back in November of 2025, it was announced that Cigna Performance Services Racing, better known as SPS Racing, had reached an agreement to acquire AM Racing's NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series program for the upcoming season. The plan was for SPS Racing to absorb the operation and field entries in its rebranded O'Reilly Auto Parts Series team, expanding its footprint beyond ARCA into NASCAR's second tier. At the time, the announcement included SPS branding on AM Racing equipment and signaled what many expected to be the start of a new era under the SPS banner. But in a surprising development, the planned acquisition was never finalized. A statement from AM Racing confirmed that while the deal had been announced and initially proceeded publicly, it ultimately didn't close, and AM Racing will instead remain as an independent team in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series for 2026. The team said in a statement that it remains committed to competition in the series and plans to build on its existing foundation heading into the new season, with driver and partnership announcements to come. We'll touch on that here in a minute. On the SPS side, team owner Joe Fair acknowledged that the work that went into preparing the transition and said SPS will continue to support a smooth handoff while refocusing its efforts on its ARCA and late model programs. For AM Racing, this means returning to the track under its own banner in 2026 rather than a new ownership. The team has steadily grown since its debut in national NASCAR competition, earning playoff appearances and top 10 results in recent seasons. The collapse of the deal also leaves a few open questions for the team's future, with 2026 season opener fast approaching and last year's driver Harrison Burton moving on to other opportunities. AM Racing still needs to lock in its driver lineup, and we'll talk about that here in a minute because they just did announce how that was going to look. So still, the fact that AM Racing will continue independently gives fans confidence on the brand, and its presence in NASCAR National Series isn't disappearing anytime soon. So we talked about how they did just release who their driver was going to be, and they're bringing over Nick Sanchez, which, in my opinion, is huge for that. I'm a huge Harrison Burton fan, and I think he did great things with that team last year, but having Sanchez, the young gun, come in, he's on a hot streak already, looked really good last year. I think this is going to help the team a lot. So seeing Nick Sanchez in that number 25 Ford is going to be pretty awesome. All right, let's talk about Corey Heim for a few minutes here. Big NASCAR news, 2311 Racing. Corey Heim's going to compete in 12 NASCAR Cup Series races in 2026 behind the wheel of the number 67 Toyota Camry as a part of the team's ongoing development program. We know Heim's their development driver and all of that. So Heim, the reigning NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series champion, who set a truck season record with 12 wins en route to a 2025 title, will kick off his Cup slate with one of the sport's biggest stages. He's going to be running Daytona this weekend. So here's a full list of what Heim's got going on. 2026, Heim's going to run Daytona 500. He's going to run Kansas in April, Texas in May, Charlotte in May for the Coke 600, Nashville in May, San Diego Street Course in June, Chicagoland. He's going to run the Brickyard in July, Daytona again for that night race in August, Darlington on September 6th, Charlotte for the fall race in October, and then Homestead, Miami, which will end us off on November 8th. So that lineup puts Heim in a dozen diverse Cup events, including all 4 of the Crown Jewel races, which is pretty awesome to see. Heim called the expansion schedule an exciting opportunity for him and said he's committed to building his skills step by step. He's quoted as saying, "I'm excited and honored to continue my progression with 2311. Every driver wants to race as much as possible, but I'm fully committed to the approach that I'm taking with the team, the opportunity to grow and expand my racecraft on and off the track." Heim will again be led by crew chief Booty Barker in the number 67, the same veteran leader who guided him through his previous Cup starts. 11 co-owner Denny Hamlin emphasized this part-time approach as a long-term development rather than rushing Heim into a full season by saying, quote, "We know the future is really bright for Corey. We're continuing to stick with our plan and taking the long-term approach." While this isn't a full-time Cup ride yet, it is an expanded schedule, represents a significant step in Heim's progression towards a potential full season opportunity in the future. We'll keep you updated as more details come out, including potential sponsor partners and how Heim performs in his 2026 Cup starts. All right, that kicks us off to the history segment, so here we go. Today's history segment takes us into one of the most complex and fascinating careers in America's short track racing with Gary Hot Shoe Ballou. Before his wins, before the controversy, which you're going to love here soon, and long before his name became legendary, Gary Ballou was just a kid growing up in South Florida with a natural feel for speed. Ballou was born on September 16, 1947 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Unlike drivers who came up through wealthy racing families, Gary's early path was rooted in local tracks, borrowed equipment, and raw talent. He started racing in the 1960s, running jalopies and local late models at tracks throughout Florida. From the beginning, people started noticing the same thing. He was fearless, he was smooth, and fast almost immediately. It didn't take long for Ballou to separate himself from the field. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, he was winning regularly at tracks like Sunshine Speedway, often against older, more established drivers. He wasn't just winning, though, he was dominating. That ability to show up, qualify up front, and control races earned him the nickname Hot Shoe, a term reserved for drivers who could hop into almost anything and make it fast. As the 1970s rolled on, Ballou became one of the most prolific short track racers in the country. He raced late models, modifieds, and super late models, traveling wherever the money and competition were best. Over his career, he amazed well over 1,000 feature wins, a number that puts him in a rare company even by short track standards. He won major events like the Syracuse 200, the All-American 400, the World Crown 300, and later the Snowball Derby. In 1986, he capped off a dominant season by winning the NASCAR All-Pro Super Series Championship, cementing his stature as one of the best pavement racers in the country. That success opened doors to NASCAR's highest level. Between 1979 and 1992, Ballou made 22 NASCAR Cup Series starts, including multiple Daytona 500 appearances. While Cup racing success never really fully materialized for him, simply reaching that level was a massive achievement for a driver who came up through Florida short tracks. Here's where it gets tricky. Behind the scenes, Ballou's life was heading towards a hard left turn. During the height of his racing career, Gary Ballou became involved in a drug smuggling, specifically a marijuana trafficking side story. But this wasn't really a side story. It became a defining moment in his life. In the late 1980s, Ballou was arrested and eventually convicted on federal drug charges. He was sentenced to 45 and a half months in prison, abruptly halting his racing career at the time when the momentum was still on his side. The conviction shocked the racing world. He went from winning races and championships to being completely removed from the sport. Sponsorships vanished, opportunities disappeared. His absence was immediate and total. Blue later admitted that the money and lifestyle played a role. Short track racing, even at the highest levels, didn't always provide long-term financial security. He made decisions that, by his own account, cost him years of his career and nearly everything he'd built. After serving his sentence, Blue returned to racing, and in classic hot shoe fashion, he didn't ease back in. In one of the most remarkable chapters of his story, he won his return race, proving that time away hadn't dulled his skill or competitive fire. Still, things were never quite the same. He continued racing and winning on a regional level. The path to sustained national prominence was gone. Blue later told his story in his autobiography, Hot Shoe, A Checkered Past, My Story, offering a brutally honest look at both the highs and lows of his life. What makes Gary Blue's legacy endure isn't just the staggering number of wins. It's a full arc of the story: natural talent, relentless success, self-inflicted downfall, and hard-earned redemption. He remains a symbol of what short track racing can produce at its best, and a cautionary tale of how quickly it can all disappear. Love him or criticize him, Gary Hot Shoe Ballou is impossible to ignore, and his place in motorsports history is firmly secured. So now that we've laid that story out, this is where the debate really starts. How should motorsports history remember Gary Hot Shoe Ballou? On one side of the argument, the case is simple. Ballou was one of the greatest short track racers of all time, over 1,000 wins, success across multiple disciplines, victories in some of the most prestigious pavement races in the country. His peers didn't question his talent. They feared racing him. When Gary showed up, everyone else was racing for second. There's also the fact that short track racing, especially in his era, wasn't forgiving financially. Drivers traveled constantly, raced for purses that barely covered expenses, relied heavily on cash deals, found a way to fund his racing, and while the method was illegal, some argue it doesn't erase what he accomplished behind the wheel. Then there's the other side. Ballou's legal troubles weren't minor. Drug smuggling is pretty serious, and it cost him years of his career. It also derailed opportunities that other drivers would have given up anything for. Some fans feel that when you talk about his legacy, you can't separate the driver from the decisions he made off the track. Those choices didn't just affect him, they affected the teams, the sponsors, and the sport's reputation. There's also the question of what could have been had Ballou stayed clean and focused. Would he have become a long-term NASCAR Cup contender? Would his name still sit alongside sport's biggest stars instead of living in a short track folklore? And then the redemption angle. After prison, Ballou didn't hide. He came back, raced again, and openly owned his mistakes. He didn't rewrite history or dodge responsibility. For some fans, that honesty matters. And I think I'm one of those, right? It shows growth, accountability, and respect for the sport that made him who he was. So where does this leave his legacy? Is Gary Ballou a cautionary tale, a misunderstood short track legend, or both? Maybe the most honest answer is that the story reflects racing itself. High risk, high reward, no guarantee of a clean ending. Either way, when the conversation turns to the greatest short track racers in American history, Gary Ballou belongs in that discussion. So when you think about the American history of short track racing, definitely keep him in mind and everything he's accomplished. And that's going to do it for this episode of Historic Hot Laps. We've covered some of the big current news, took a deep dive into the career and legacy of a guy who had some better decision-making skills later in life, laid out why his story still matters in racing today, wins, controversy, redemption. It's exactly what the kind of history podcast was built for, right? This is the kind of stuff we like. As always, this episode is just part of what we're building here. We've got more history, more debate, more stories from every corner of motorsports coming your way every week. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure Historic Hot Laps is a regular stop for you. Subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you listen so don't miss future episodes as they drop. And don't forget to follow us on the social medias. That's where we share updates, episode previews, throwbacks, photos. We keep the conversation going between shows, all that kind of stuff. If you've got thoughts on today's topics, especially the Gary Ballou legacy debate, we want to hear them. Thanks for spending the part of your day with us. We appreciate every listen, every share, and every return visit. We'll see you next time on Historic Hot Laps. Stay safe. Thanks for tuning in.